What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cara's Cucina. I am so excited about today's guest. You know him from Great Food Truck Race. You know him from Chopped. He is the owner of ESO Pasta in Morristown, New Jersey. AJ Sankofa, thank you so much for coming out here and cooking with me today. I'm so excited to have you.
No, thank you for having us. Seriously, this is going to be awesome.
So just tell us briefly a little bit about the dish that you brought to us today. What are we making?
Sure. So really simple. Orecchiette. We're going to have some sweet Italian sausage, chili flake, broccoli rabe. Really classic. We're going to emulsify that with a little bit of pecorino and olive oil from southern Italy. It's going to be delicious.
Absolutely amazing. Guys, this is one of my favorite dishes. This is probably one of the easiest pasta dishes you could. This is like weeknight dinner stuff.
Super simple, yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get started. What's going to be our first step?
Sure. So we've got some water boiling right here. I'm going to trim up this broccoli rabe, get it blanched, and then we'll cut that up later on.
Cool. Okay, so you already said you're just going to chop off the ends here.
Yeah, I'm just going to chop off the ends. We'll blanch them whole, and then we'll cut them up later.
Oh, okay. So I do it in the reverse. I cut them and then blanch them.
It's all
so
good.
There you go. Everybody's got their own way of doing things. So we're just going to blanch this. So just for anybody at home, just a couple minutes in there, right?
That's right. Make sure we season our water with a fair amount of kosher salt.
He's even more generous than me with that salt.
And then we'll just ease it on in there.
So I always learned when it, like, about 2 minutes when it turns like a really deep, bright green kind of color.
Yep, and we'll pop the lid on there. Give it another minute.
Another minute or so.
Pop it onto our ice.
I was just saying, you've got an ice bath prepared here. Why would we go from boiling water into an ice bath?
So we just want to shock the cooking process, right? So right now it's at 212 degrees, hopefully, right? And we want to bring that down to as cold as this ice is.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself and ESO Pasta and what you guys are trying to do with that, please.
Sure. So essentially, ESO Artisanal Pasta is a retail storefront for fresh pastas, sauces, and desserts, as well as some imported goods from Italy. Right now, we service our customers in-store, we deliver nationwide, and we also do events, private events for birthday parties, anniversaries, tasting menus, whatever someone is looking for.
Amazing. And you guys make all the pasta fresh in-house by hand?
That's correct.
That is so cool. And again, nationwide delivery. So anybody watching, you can order the pasta and get it right here. It comes frozen, right?
Comes frozen right online, yep.
Amazing. That's so cool.
So we're just gonna remove this straight into our bowl with ice. Notice how it's nice and bright green. And those stems, they're still gonna be a little bit firm, but remember, we're gonna cook these again once we saute our pasta all together, so we gotta be mindful of that.
Okay.
Once it's in our ice water, we're just gonna make sure it's all nice and evenly submerged. We'll let it hang out there for a little bit, and then we'll transfer it to a sheet tray. Cool, so now that our broccoli rabe is nice and cooled down, we're just gonna lay it on to a sheet tray. We don't want it to hang out in that water for too long, otherwise it'll start getting soggy.
And you learned to make pasta in Italy.
That is true.
Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, so I went to the Italian Culinary Institute for Foreigners back in 2016. I took the master's course.
Okay.
And from there I worked in a number of restaurants, one of which was one Michelin star, Ristorante La Rosa, which was then located in Alba, which is the white truffle capital of the world. Since then they've relocated to Torino.
What possessed you to pursue that and pasta specifically? I mean, your Italian's beautiful, but I imagine, you know, here you are. You're originally from New Jersey?
I'm originally from New York, actually.
New York, okay. But kid from New York, kid from the States, transplants into Italy.
Right.
You know, like what, how did that seems like such a wild adventure. How did that come about?
Yeah, it all started at Jockey Hall Bar and Kitchen, which opened my senior year of high school. I started there as a busboy, and as soon as I got into the restaurant game, I just loved it. I loved the intensity, the fast pace, so I worked my way up the ranks. And while I was a food runner in the kitchen, I was working under executive chef Kevin Sipple. I was enamored by what was going on in the kitchen. The camaraderie, the love, the passion, and the pasta station specifically, that was like the rock star of the kitchen. Tossing all the pans, moving super fast, plating, it just looked so cool to me. So that's kind of who I wanted to be. Fast forward a couple months, I had dropped out of Fairleigh Dickinson University, and I was thinking to myself, I gotta do what Kevin did. So he worked in, he went to school in Italy, he went to school in France and London. So I was like, I have to figure out how to follow in his footsteps so I can be like this guy. So I started looking up schools, and I stumbled upon one called the Italian Culinary Institute for Foreigners, and I asked him about it. And he looks at my phone, then he looks at me, and he takes out a graduation photo from the same school. So once I saw that, 6 months later, I was out.
That was it. And what did your parents say? Because I imagine most parents, when your kid is like, so I'm dropping out of college to go to Italy to learn how to make pasta, they probably scratch their heads a little bit.
Yeah, they were not happy. It took several years for that all to work out in their minds, but we made it. We made it happen.
I was going to say, I imagine they're very proud of you at this point.
At this point, key words.
You always got to prove yourself, right?
That's right.
That's it.
Awesome. So now we've got our sweet Italian sausage here. So we're just going to go ahead and take these out of the casing. We'll squeeze it right into this bowl, and then we'll season it up.
Now, how do you season sausage? Because in my mind, it's already seasoned.
So I want the sausage to be extra seasoned.
Okay.
So I like to throw just a little bit of salt and black pepper in there.
Okay.
And that comes out really nicely, like when you sear the sausage and toast it, that black pepper kind of accentuates itself. It's a really nice addition to the already flavorful sausage. All right, and then we'll just get in there, mix that up. And so what I like to do when I'm doing anything that's meat related, ground meat related, I like to make little meatballs out of the meat.
Okay.
And like little burgers, and then I sear them so I get a nice sear on the outside, and then I mash them up later.
Oh.
So instead of just throwing the whole like kind of blob in the pan, you get more texture that way.
More texture to it.
Yep.
We really just can't deny the fact that my dog is right here, right under Chef's feet, desperate for him to drop a piece of this sausage. I mean,
I think I did. I think
there's
that's what's
no
going
way
on.
around it. Oh, you know what? She's got it on the rag.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure.
All right, so I think that's so interesting about the little like meatballs to get the texture. Is that something you personally came up with, or did somebody show you that?
Honestly, it's just a combination of working at several different restaurants. The restaurant Cucina and I met at, they did that.
Okay.
There was one chef that I knew in Italy that did it. And then it just kind of clicked. It made sense. Like, why would I throw like this whole thing in a pan if I could like get a nice sear on every single side, you know? So I think it just comes with, you know, working for different people and picking up little things.
Finding little things that work for you.
Yep, 100%.
I see, and I think that's so, even this is so interesting to me because I'm like, oh my gosh, I never seasoned my sausage meat before. I'm like, it's already seasoned. It's in sausage, and I think that's such a great idea. Do you find a huge difference between Italian cuisine and kitchens and the way they prepared food and how we do things here?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's night and day. You know, and I think that happens with every culture, every cuisine. When you take it from the home country and try to put it, you know, in a different country, especially America, where we're such a melting pot, you have to adjust to the palate that's here.
Yeah.
You know, even with our stuff, I mean, we have really classic Italian things that we sell, and then we have some stuff that, you know, you wouldn't find in Italy, but we know that people want.
That people want to hear. Right. Absolutely. What's an example of one of those things that's like purely Italian American? Purely Italian American?
On our menu or in general?
No, on your menu.
On our menu, the mac and cheese for sure.
Oh, the mac and cheese.
It's my grandma's recipe. We're from North Carolina. I mean, nothing like the pasta al forno that you would have in Italy.
Right.
But, you know, it's the same concept.
I definitely once had a Neapolitan girl look at me and she was like, fuck is mac and cheese? Like, she just could not wrap her head around the whole thing. And I was like, the same thing. I was like, think pasta al forno, but cheese.
It's very interesting how they used like spaghetti for pasta al forno. That was like so weird to me. Like, I feel like that's one thing I think we did a little better. We made it more bite-sized.
Yeah.
You know? All right, so now that we have our little meatballs, right, our Italian sausage meatballs, we're waiting for our pan to heat up. We got our broccoli rabe. It's time to get going with the garlic.
Okay.
So what I like to do is I like to sear my meatballs first, right? Pull them out, and then all the fat that's left in there is what I toast the garlic in.
I like how you think. I like how you operate. Now, is there, you know, people always laugh at me. They're like, too much garlic, and I'm like, there's not a point where you've reached too much garlic. So, how much do you normally use for a dish like this?
So, the rule of thumb that I learned when I was in Italy is 1 clove per person.
Per person?
But I like to do, so this is for 4, this recipe we're doing, I like to do 6. So I just throw an extra 2 in there just for good measure.
Just for good measure.
Can't go wrong.
Now, what is you're just kind of peeling it by hand. Do you have I feel like every chef has their own trick for peeling garlic.
So honestly, I think the best way to do it is to just plunge this whole thing into cold water.
Really? Okay, see, now that's one I've never heard of.
Yeah, and I should be doing that. I was a little, you know, I didn't want anyone to judge me for that, so I just figured I'd save that for if you asked.
But cold water just takes the peel off, or?
It just makes it easier.
Oh, okay.
It softens everything up, and then you can kind of take a paring knife and just kind of cut down. And
yeah. See, I'm a big fan of just smashing it with the knife
smash,
because it's very cathartic.
I feel like personally, when you smash it, it's like you get a more powerful version of the garlic versus if you delicately peel it and then slice it, which is what we're gonna do.
Okay. You started this business in the middle of a pandemic, really. I mean,
that's true.
You know, you kind of have a pandemic baby here.
Very much so, yeah. We were, Christina and I actually, we were working in New York City when the pandemic hit at Legacy Records. And, you know, I think like everybody, you know, we thought we were just gonna be on a 2-week vacation. And then 2 weeks turned into 4 turned into 8. So we actually started off with a business that Christina was running, which was a cake and pie delivery service. So Christina would bake, she would take pre-orders, we did Mother's Day, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. And I would deliver, and that blew up. It took off. And once that happened, we were like, well, wait a minute, we could probably just do the same thing with pasta. So we started up ESO, and we were originally gonna make that a delivery service as well, but Andrea of the Artist Baker in Morristown, who was my old pastry chef at Jockey, she called us up like the week we were gonna open up for pre-orders, and she was like, do you guys just wanna use my dining room as a storefront? We were like, sure. And so from then on, yeah, we've had a storefront, and then we got our own in 2021, and we just kept climbing the ranks.
That is absolutely incredible. Christina, by the way, is his beautiful wife that he also works with, and yeah. She's an incredible pastry chef. So you guys met working together, right?
Yeah. People always ask how we work together, and I'm like, that's all we know.
That's all, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See, pasta is so good for all kinds of things.
There you go.
Now, what were was there something surprising that you learned in Italy about cooking or prepping ingredients or anything like something where you were like, I never have heard of that in my life?
Well, I think the main thing that was surprising to me was like everything that I knew, or at least that I thought I knew about Italian food growing up in America was just, it didn't exist.
Not at all true.
You know, there's no such thing as chicken parm, there's no such thing as spaghetti and meatballs. Like all these like colossal dishes in America, just they're not real.
They don't exist there.
That was probably the biggest thing. I mean, outside of that, I didn't really know much about cooking, you know, so I wasn't going off of a huge, you know, foundation.
Did you cook growing up? Did your family cook or?
Yeah, my family's, but I mean, like when you talk about like Italian food, like to us, you know, we don't, you know, we make spaghetti with meat sauce, but it's like,
it's not at all the same.
There's no Italian influence besides the spaghetti.
But
you know what I mean? But yeah, so I didn't really have too many expectations, you know what I mean? I just, again, was just there, like in a foreign country at 18, you know? All right, so I have this little trick that I like to use when I slice garlic. So we're gonna slice this really thin, but first what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our olive oil. Okay. And we are going to just squeeze a little bit on the knife.
So it doesn't stick to the knife.
So it doesn't stick, yeah.
There's a whole room of people behind these cameras and all of them just went.
So get our olive oil in there, and then I'm just gonna douse these up a little bit. And we can switch if you
No, you're good. I'm just getting out of your way.
All right, and then we'll just slice these nice and thin.
Next time we do this show with a live audience so you can hear the audible sigh. All right, now I'm gonna go with, these are, you know, knife skills that you learn in culinary school. Folks at home, just slicing the garlic is sufficient?
It's definitely sufficient, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you get the idea of the recipe, it's gonna come out good. We're not doing anything crazy.
Right. All right, now I have to ask, because I was taught to cook by old Italian women, but you were taught to cook by Italian chefs. Do they actually give you measurements? Because I always just got like, when it smells right, when it looks right,
it's
a little of this, a little of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of both. Like in a culinary school, we got recipes, but when we actually cooked, like when we had to do our demonstrations and whatnot, there was a lot of like, you know, interpretation involved. And I think that that's important because ultimately, a recipe can't really save you or help you during service when you need to figure out how to build a dish from scratch 100 times in a row. You have to know certain visual, audio visual smells, and
I was gonna say, it's all your senses. I think, and I think that's a question that I get a lot, where people are like, you know, well, how do you know? And it's like, A, it's repetition, right? Mm-hmm. And then B, it's like you really do want to use all your senses. You want to taste things as you go. You want to listen to it. Is that pan hot enough? Did that make the right sound when I let it go in and things like that?
Very much so. Yeah. Very important. Now we've got our garlic sliced up. I think this pan is nice and hot, so we'll go ahead and use our grapeseed oil here.
Now, why grapeseed? Because I know somebody's going to ask me that.
Grapeseed oil has a very high smoke point. So I think like 400 plus degrees. So it's going to allow us to sear our sausages without the oil burning, right?
There you go. I just remember when we were talking about using all your senses, the sound, that's the sound you're looking for.
That's right. So I try to give them a nice, even amount of space to cook so they don't steam. Get that nice sear on there.
When you do that, what are you doing?
So, well, there's like a certain smell, you know, when something starts getting a sear.
Okay.
And there's like, it's going to smell good, and then it's going to smell like it's burning. So you just don't want to smell that burning.
That burning.
Right. So then you can, like, another rule of thumb is like, once you can kind of pick it up,
once
like
it releases from the
then,
pan, yeah.
you know that you can turn it right over with no issue, really.
Notice AJ has chef hands that they're just in there with hot oil and he's not too concerned. When you go out to eat at a restaurant and you taste their pasta, I mean, are you comparing? Are you looking for something? Are you looking for inspiration?
It depends on where I am. Like if I'm in New York and they're claiming to make it in-house, then yeah, I'm thinking like, okay, we're using better flour, you know, like, or we're not, or they're on par with us.
They're on par.
And that's really, I mean, that's a lot of seemingly a lot of chefs that aren't really into the pasta thing, they don't realize that the flour is like the most important part. More so than the eggs, more so than anything. It's the flour and
Why?
then technique. Well, the flour is what gives you the final texture, number one. And number two, it's what determines how easy it's going to be to work with the dough and how hydrated the dough can get before it's too much liquid for it. So, I mean, the better the flour is, the more hydration it can take. The more hydration it can take, the more egg/water you can put in. The more egg specifically that you can put in, the richer the dough is going to be.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of science that I think people just aren't really paying attention to. But again, like I realize that I'm in a unique situation where I just so happen to live in this country on 2 different occasions for 6-7 months. So. It is what it is.
Can you tell us like what kind of flour you use or the?
Yeah, so we use, actually this is a funny story. We just got back from Medford, Massachusetts yesterday.
Okay.
So the past like 2.5 years we've been using Molino Denti, which comes from Italy.
Okay.
But there was like a problem with their relationship with the distributor, so they kind of like parted ways. And I was actually able to get my hands on what's called Petra. The brand name is Quaglia. And that is the flour that I used when I worked in the 1 Michelin star restaurant in Italy. And I've been trying to get that flour back in the States since like 2016 to no avail. But now that like we have a business and like I can show there's a reasonable demand, we'll order X amount, we're able to make a deal with them. So we just actually, in the trunk right now, we have like 200 kilos. It's like weighing down the car. It's super heavy. And I'm really excited about that. We're going to put that to good use.
That is amazing. Yeah. And it's, so many people who cannot eat pasta here in this country often find they go to Italy and it doesn't totally bother them. Yep. And I think so much of it, like you said, it's the flour, it's the wheat grain, it's whatever they're using to make it.
We had the craziest thing happen. There's a customer that we have who's gluten-free. Or not gluten-free, celiac.
Okay.
He can't have gluten. Yeah. And he accidentally bought our regular pasta instead of gluten-free. Or it might have even been my fault. I think I accidentally gave him regular instead of gluten-free, whatever. So like 3 weeks later, he comes into the shop and he's like, "Hey man, I had the gluten-free or I had the regular pasta and I wasn't supposed to. I have celiac, and nothing happened."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Nothing happened." Yeah, he was like, there was no issue. So that he went back to getting the gluten-free, but then like 2-3 months later, he tried the regular pasta intentionally again, and he was like, "Yeah, nothing happened." And now he only gets our regular pasta.
And it's that flour from Italy that makes all the difference. That is wild.
Right, like the stuff that we picked up was milled 3 weeks ago. Stuff that we picked up yesterday. And then it just went on the ship, came across.
And it's so funny because I think people don't think of flour as a fresh product.
Yeah, because no one realizes that it's a flour, literally. Like it grows out of the ground. You know?
Right. Yeah, we think of it as shelf stable. We buy it, we leave it in the pantry forever.
That's
And I remember learning that while I was over there as well, where they basically said, listen, this is meant to be a fresh product. It's picked, it's ground, it's packed, and you should know when all those things happen.
Yeah, but we live in a different,
Yeah, food here is
different.
it's a mess. It's really what it is.
So once I see that we got some nice color on there, we'll just give it a little mash.
I'm so fascinated by this. I've never seen anybody do this before.
Yeah, it comes out really well because now you got all these like
now
nice.
You have all those nice brown bits. That's why I was like, I'm gonna start doing this.
All right, so at this point, we'll just take it off the heat. We don't want to cook it too much. We want it to stay nice and juicy. All right, and now that it's kind of broken up, you can take a little piece and taste it. See where we're at.
What are you looking for?
Flavor.
Just flavor?
And there's a lot of it.
There's a lot of it.
There you go. So now we've got this. And then we're just gonna go ahead and go right back into this pan with olive oil this time. Get all that nice fat in there. And then we're just gonna toast our garlic low and slow. So we've got our garlic in the pan, got some olive oil, got that nice, beautiful color, and even before we start cooking it, you can smell the olive oil, you can smell the garlic, it's very nice. It
smells so good.
So we're gonna adjust our heat down to medium here, and we don't want the garlic to get any color. We just want it to melt right into this pan. This is gonna be the base of all of our flavor.
All right, talk to me a little bit about olive oil. What do you look for when you buy olive oil? Because again, when we talk about things that people don't consider to be fresh products, but they are, you know, what should people look for when they go to the store to buy olive oil? I get this question a lot.
Frantoio Carano. It's a olive oil that comes from Salerno.
Okay.
I mean, here, the best way to do this is just to grab a spoon, and we'll let you try it right on camera. To me, this is the best of the best. It's very versatile. You can use it for cooking. You can use it for finishing a salad. This shit has like a divine flavor to it.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So that's what we look for. I don't really know how to put that into words.
I mean, I would just say like it's like the fat first, then the olive, then that little peppery finish at the end.
Yeah, really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, it's very nice. And again, different oils from different regions will have different flavors. So
very much so.
Do just that. I tell people all the time, taste your olive oil just straight in your home and see what you like. As I lick the spoon some more.
We want to be sure that we don't have any of the garlic sticking to the sides. And notice how I continuously remove the garlic from the heat because again, we're not trying to get any color on it. We just want it to really melt right into the pan and eventually into our sauce.
Now, Chef, are you also kind of scraping up some of that brown sausage from the bottom of the pan while you're doing this?
You know it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our chili flake, right, to this little mixture, just a little bit so we have some heat, and we'll allow that to toast with the garlic and olive oil as well. We're gonna go ahead and put this off to the side. We'll add our meat back to the pan. And we're just gonna go in for a little round 2 of breaking this up. And you just want it to be bite-sized, you know. You don't want to try to eat a meatball with a bite of your small orecchiette pasta, so.
Do you want me to break this up while you...
Oh, you can?
Yeah. Oh, so you did something earlier that I wanted to ask you about. You actually tasted the water itself.
Yes, and so here's the thing about tasting your water. And I always tell this to people. You're always going to hear people say to you, you need to taste your pasta water, make sure it's salty, it should taste like the ocean, this and the third. And after working with pasta for the past 8-9 years, what I like to say is taste and season, especially your pasta water, depending on the dish you're making. Okay. Right, so there's some dishes that are going to be naturally saltier than others, like a dish that has sausage in it, right?
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily going to want my pasta water to be as salty as I would if I were making, let's say, a vegetable-based pasta dish that could use the extra oomph, right?
Okay.
So what I wanted to make sure is that this wasn't overly salty, so that way when I cook the pasta, I don't have super salty, and then cheese on top that's even saltier.
It's even saltier.
I want room to be able to emulsify the cheese into the pasta.
Okay.
And that's going to be salty as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fine tuning that has to happen.
I like that. I love all these tips. You've got some great, I mean, it's stuff that we just don't usually hear about. I think it's, you know, such a credit to the fact that you went to school in Italy.
Yeah, that did a lot of it. That and good chefs here in America that also studied overseas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, because we're using orecchiette, which is little ears,
little ears, yeah.
Why does the shape of the pasta matter? What difference does, like, why would you use this shape with this dish and, you know, maybe something else, a packery and something else?
Right, so I mean, with this dish, what you really are looking for is the ability to, in a spoon, be able to get a piece of the pasta, you want to get some of that meat, and you want to be able to get some of the broccoli rabe. And when you are mushing up, I guess you could, what would you call this? Smashing up the meat to about the size of the pasta, and you cut the broccoli rabe to about the size of the pasta, it makes for one good bite.
One bite.
But also, what these little ears do is they allow the pasta to soak up some of that sauce,
like
soak
little
up some of that
scoops.
garlic, right? So you get a really powerful flavor with each bite, which is important, and it's difficult. Like, imagine if we were doing this with spaghetti. If you took a bite of the spaghetti, you'd get a whole bite of pasta, and then you'd have to eat everything else separate.
Go back for everything else.
Right. So while you're doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and cut up this broccoli rabe here.
Awesome.
And what I like to do is I like to kind of cut these into 3 different sections, right? So there's like the straight stem section, there's the stems and leaf section, and then there's just the nice florets. And I like to kind of keep these separate. So I'll cut the stems the smallest, right? And then I like to cut the stem and leaf part kind of just in half, so you get that nice leafy bite.
Yep.
And then I just leave these whole.
I like it.
There you go.
And really, I mean, I guess it really does make sense, because that's going to be the toughest bite, so you want a smaller piece. Those are more tender. That's the most tender. I dive for those big florets like that. Now, when folks order pasta from you guys, is this usually how it'll come in a package like this?
Yep, it's resealable. You can pop it back in your freezer.
Nice.
Use however much you want. It's really convenient.
Very cool. And it's a 1 pound bag?
1 pound bag.
There you go.
So when we go to add all this together, we're actually going to add by what's going to cook the longest and the quickest. There's not going to be a huge discrepancy, but I typically like to mount the stems first because they can take a little extra cook, but these you kind of want to serve right away. Just get them nice and hot. We got our water boiling. It's nice and salted, so we can go ahead and pop that right in.
Okay. Come on. Now, and again, because these are fresh pastas, is there a difference? You know, we're used to boxed semolina wheat pasta takes, 8 to 10 minutes to cook. How long do we usually cook this for?
1 to 2 minutes.
1 to 2 minutes.
So when we make our pasta, we like to we make it and we leave it out for a little bit so it can get a nice dry on it, and then we flash freeze it. So depending on the humidity, the temperature, it can vary. But I always tell our customers about 1 to 2 minutes, or with certain shapes, you can actually just wait till they float. And you'll see. But with the fresh pasta, I like to err on the more cautious side. So what I'll do is about 30 seconds into them being dropped, give them a nice stir, and then I just like to taste one. So we got 2, so we got lucky there.
There we go.
We can both taste.
Thank you much.
No problem.
And so obviously in Italian we say we're looking for al dente. What does al dente mean?
To the teeth.
To the tooth. And what are we looking, what does that, I mean, in terms of?
So you just want it to have a nice bite to it, a nice chew. You don't want it to be mush, right? And I think as you taste that, you can see that we're kind of right there.
Yeah,
only a minute in.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to pull my pasta just before al dente, so that way I can cook it to al dente in the sauce.
Yep.
Right? So now that our pasta is right before al dente, we're gonna go ahead and scoop it out and into our pan. And we're gonna let some of that starchy water go ahead and get into the pan. That's gonna help us build our sauce.
I always, when people talk about, straining the pasta or like dumping the water down the drain, it always makes me cringe a little bit, right? It's like cooking gold, that pasta water.
You don't know what you don't know. I mean, I never knew that until I started working in restaurants. So, you can't blame people. It's just, it takes, you have to seek this kind of knowledge out.
Right.
It's not gonna come to you. We've got our pasta in the pan. We've got the pan on. So we're gonna start, oops, sorry about that.
That's what the dog's been waiting for all day.
So we're gonna start just tossing this pasta a little bit, and we've got we didn't use the right size pan, so bear with us. We're gonna be extra careful to be sure we don't make too much of a mess. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of our nice extra virgin olive oil.
That's fine.
In
She's actually part of the cleaning crew, the dog, so it's all good.
And once we start getting this nice and hot, then we'll add our broccoli rabe. And then the last step is to add our cheese, adjust with water, makes that sauce extra creamy, and then we're ready to serve. Beautiful.
I can't wait. It smells so good in here.
At this point, we can go ahead and add our greens, right? All right, so we don't want to take too long, all right? We're at that perfect point where the pasta is perfectly cooked. We really just want to heat up the greens.
My anxiety is he's doing this.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and add some of our wink wink Pecorino Romano. It's actually Parmigiano Reggiano. I brought the wrong cheese. I apologize, guys. But for you guys making this at home, use Pecorino Romano.
Why Pecorino over Parmigiano?
So the Pecorino is a sheep's milk cheese. It's got that super, super pungent, salty flavor that just works so well with the broccoli rabe and the sausage. The Parmigiano Reggiano is a lot more like umami-centric and more earthy.
Okay.
And for a pasta like this, you want it to be sharp. You want those flavors to be bold. So as we start mixing this, as you can see, it's starting to get a little creamier.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
We're gonna add some more of that starchy water. All right. Get some more of our olive oil in here. Get some more of our cheese in there.
Not mad. I'm not mad at the amount of cheese.
No, not at all. You gotta build that sauce. All the liquid that's at the bottom of the pan to come up. And while I do that, while I'm waiting, I'm adding a little bit more cheese and I'm just gonna taste. And I wanna see where the pasta is at now. If I taste it all together, the broccoli rabe, the sausage, and a piece of the pasta.
Now, why is it important to taste as you go, as you're building?
So you wanna make sure you're moving in the right direction.
Oh man, we've got sausage, broccoli rabe, pasta, all that cheese. It's so good.
Not bad.
Oh man. I'm such a happy girl right now. Chef, I can't thank you enough for coming, sharing your immense knowledge with us. I mean, we were just saying how you have taught us so much in an hour than I've been working with chefs for years now, and that was incredible. I learned so much about a dish I make all the time.
I appreciate that. I hope you take some of our tips.
Absolutely, absolutely I will. Guys, as always, the recipe is going to be available at caradifalco.com. You can follow me, Facebook and Instagram at Cara Di Falco. You can find Chef at ESO Pasta, ESO Pasta Morristown.
That's right,
the Instagram hip. Check them out, Morristown, New Jersey. And again, if you don't live in the area, they ship nationwide. Log on, place an order. Delicious, fresh, homemade pasta shipped to your home. You are not going to beat this stuff. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one.